welcome Canadian composer Don MacDonald and Canadian wind band conductor Mark Hopkins. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of WASBE's Worldwide Winds video series. We're hoping that the series will inform people about what the wind band happenings around the world. And today's series is on Canada. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I understand that you guys have never met before.
Nope, this is the first time, and it's very exciting for me. I always wanted to meet the man who scored the film Fido, which I find to be it's my favorite zombie movie of all time, I just have to say.
You're going to have to write a wind band arrangement of ZomCon movies. Paste them all together. Shaun of the Dead. I don't know what the other ones are, but
I'm sorry to do that right off the bat, but it was one of those things where I was watching the movie and I went, wait a second, I know him, you know, but we haven't actually formally met.
Yeah.
And it's really great. Thank you.
Well,
yeah, thanks for putting this together, Colleen. Really appreciate it. It's nice to see how this piece has grown and getting a wider audience with different arrangements. And I couldn't be happier that Mark put this all together, and he just did a brilliant job with it. So it's going to be a good conversation.
Why don't we begin with just telling our viewers a little bit about each of you, and I'd love to know something about your background, what inspires you, what work you're doing now. Don, it would be great if you would start.
Sure. Yeah, well, my musical career kind of began on my mother's lap. She was a pianist for a boys' choir in Nelson, British Columbia, and so at the age of 5, I just started singing along, and I've been singing ever since, and really composing for choirs since university. I met my wife having written a piece for her in first year university. So my life has really been built around writing music for choirs, but also for instrumentalists as well. I'm a trained violinist. I went to university for violin. Halfway through, I got jumped by a bunch of friends who were rugby players and crushed my arm, so I couldn't play violin anymore. So I started playing sax. I continued to play saxophone. Graduated as a saxophone major, and but I play them all. I play violin and saxophone and sing. So that's afforded me kind of a good window into arranging for both orchestra and just many ensembles. So I started writing music for film in my mid-20s, did quite a bit of that for maybe about 20 years. And then I guess about 15 years ago, a good friend of mine said, Don, you know, after having written a couple of choral pieces, this guy works in with a choral publisher. He said, Don, you know, there's just not that many young people, and this is a while ago, creating choral music, and we need more Canadian music out there. And I know that you like writing music for film, but is it where your passion lies? And it really it was a troubling question for me, because I'd seen so many of my pieces of music end up on the cutting room floor, as they are wont to do in film music. You know, you might write music that is very near and dear to your heart, but it doesn't fit the storyline, and so then it gets trashed. Well, writing choral music for myself, I would say it's just a really, really gratifying thing, and I'm so humbled by the number of choirs out there and now concert bands that are willing to play these works. And you know, it's been so exciting to see the journey of this particular piece, from my first pencil drawings to my wife's later on contributions with the lyrics, and then to Mark's fantastic arrangement for concert band. It's just it's, you know, being in the music industry is a evolutionary process, and music is this huge ocean of discovery. Every day there's something new to learn, and so I'm excited, as I said, to watch the path of this piece.
Well, thank you very much for writing the original work. I didn't mean to laugh when you said you were jumped by rugby players. I didn't realize it was going to crush your arm. But
it's okay, I've gotten over it. And they were actually good friends of mine, so it was done in jest, but it had sort of tragic repercussions. Yeah.
Well, I guess, you know, like you said, you just don't know the journey that you're on, right?
That's exactly it. And in some ways, you know, it sets a path, not a path that you might have considered uh, to be one of your choices, but it made me delve a little deeper into jazz music and improvisation. And you know, I don't play so much saxophone anymore, but I do play a lot of jazz violin. So that makes its way in subtle ways into all my writing as well. So, you know, these somewhat tragic events can shape you in ways that you hadn't originally considered.
I'd say that's very true. Mark, would you please share some information?
Yeah, there's not that much to say. I have a job.
I would disagree with that, Mark Hopkins. Having known you, I'm just meeting Don, but I've known Mark Hopkins for a very long time, Don, and there's always something going on with Mark Hopkins.
Now, we both know that that can mean many things, so we'll just leave that alone for the moment. But I'm very fortunate. I have a job. I'm a professor at Acadia University in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. And I love the job here, and I love the platform it gives, allowing me to try different things. So I guess it was back around 2011, I got my first sabbatical ever. And during that sabbatical, I taught myself to use Sibelius for the purpose of tackling some arranging projects and that kind of thing. So that's how I slipped into this role that we're discussing today. Most of the time, I lead the wind ensemble at Acadia University. I have a new music festival that I work with on a regular basis out here. Released a couple of CDs with chamber musicians of various sorts. I have a great interest in Canadian wind band music. And if you check out my website, you'll see that there's a really comprehensive list of that music out there. And I'm always actively seeking opportunities to put together commissions and find new rep that will make the wind band sound even more beautiful and interesting. And that's just one of the pursuits I'm on. The other thing, interestingly enough, Don, you mentioned improvisation has crept into your life. I've been studying sound painting with Walter Thompson, who's its originator, and that's an improvisation technique that I'm finding more and more interesting and useful in a whole range of different fields, including music therapy and music education here at the university. So those are the kinds of things I do. I get to work with the Dennis Wick Canadian Wind Orchestra annually. I'm part of the team that runs the Nova Scotia Youth Wind Ensemble. Just basic stuff, you know, busy, work. That's what I like to do.
I'd love to continue on and just talk about, and maybe you're going to help me with the pronunciation, but Tabula Rasa, is that correct?
That's a good question. That's one you better ask my wife. She's sadly not here at the moment, but I just Tabula Rasa. Yeah, and Allison's text is in Spanish, and it was it's interesting because when we started off in this path, this is a music first and lyric second, or poetry second. And boy, am I lucky to have a wife that can write poetry like that. Holy crow. But there's something also, you know, this is written with the idea of a mother rocking her child to sleep. And one of the things that I said to Allison about the way that I was feeling the music is that there are these moments that suggest just the subtle in and out breath of the child, and the kind of give and take between the mother and child was an important part of the compositional process. So there's these little echoes that happen in the piece that are sort of that. It's an echo of the mother's breath going to the child's breath and back and forth. And anyhow, she decided to put it into Spanish, and I just think it was one of the most beautiful choices. You know, our English language has so many strong plosives that it's not a language that's great for putting children to sleep. And you know, if I was going to choose to be, if I was thinking about being put to sleep, I would definitely choose the Spanish language. It's just so beautiful. So luckily, all the words that she chose and in Spanish are just so gorgeous words to sing. And that's not always the easiest thing as well. You know, when you're asking a soprano to sing high in the register, you have to find exactly the right vowel. You know, the choice of vowel can be a big deal. So having a partner in crime that understands the voice is, I consider myself very lucky.
I love your description about the intake of breath, and then from the mother and from the child. And I feel like that's wonderfully evident in the piece. It does feel like it's breathing, I find, when it's played correctly.
I
But
also think that it's a good choice for wind band in that way too. That the breath is such an important part of it. And again, to just to exalt Mark's arrangement of it, it does such a wonderful job of these breaths moving between sections. The woodwinds, then the brass, and there's kind of a handover of those gestures from one group to the next.
Don, would you describe your compositional style that you used for Tabula Rasa?
Sure. It's a piece that kind of celebrates this moment by using breath, by using subtle dissonances that kind of ebb and flow as the piece progresses. But it's also one where the form is building to 2/3 of the way through a really, really kind of grand gesture. And to me, this is something I'm always looking for in composition, is something that happens 2/3 of the way through the piece, a moment that kind of sheds light on the rest of the piece, a culmination of all of your motifs. And so that's what happens in this moment. The whole beginning portion is about breath. And as we move forward to the 2/3 of the way through, this main melody, which is evident in the first couple of bars, comes in, and it's then played in the lower register, or sung in the lower register with the tenors and basses. And over top of it, there's this little compositional concept that I use that people have used throughout history, but it's such a simple thing. And all it is the idea of something moving upwards. And there's an inevitability about moving upwards that we don't know when that movement is going to stop, that I think is a powerful thing. It's like repetition of phrases as well. There's this inevitability and growth through the phrase. And from the audience's perspective, you don't know when that moment is going to come to its culmination, right? And so that's, I think that's what makes that section kind of powerful. And Mark did a great job with the arrangement and building it. And, with the forces of the wind ensemble, you've just got so many other layers to throw at your listeners that it makes it even that much more impactful.
I really feel that as well. There's that rising line it creates this hope throughout the entire work. And it just makes us look beyond what maybe is within our vision, right? You don't know when that child is growing, where they're going to go and who they're going to be. So I thought there was this just wonderful parallel between the music and the poetry. Mark, how did this transcription project come about for you? What drew you to this piece?
I was talking with my children about this just yesterday when I told them I was going to be talking with both of you today, because they were both in the Annapolis Valley Honor Choir, which is an absolutely terrific choir system. It's run by an amazing young woman named Heather Fraser. And it was one of the greatest things I could have my children be in. I had that full-on parent moment of going to a performance and hearing and seeing your children make art is just mind-blowing. It's one of the amazing things that happens. And Heather is wonderful in her selection of music. There is such variety and always a focus on Canadian content. So I remember the day. It was May 24, 2014. I was sitting in a church in Kentville, Nova Scotia, and it was another choir concert, and I'm happy to be there, but I was exhausted after a school year of teaching, and I had just gotten off a plane from somewhere, from working with the Dennis Wick Canadian Wind Orchestra, and I wasn't sure I wanted to go to a performance, but I went to the performance and I heard this piece, and I loved everything you just described. The way that there was an inevitability and a logic to how it built towards a moment. It gave us a taste of it, and then it pulled away again. And then I looked at the text, and I was really drawn to the Liberata Dei. I think may not be saying that correctly, but that concept that kept on coming out about hope and freedom and hoping for the best for the small person that you're holding. And I watched my kids on stage, and a number of things sealed the deal. That big moment you described earlier, I thought, oh my goodness, this is electric. And then I thought, wait a second. I work with an ensemble that can do electric things all the time. This is really, really, really beautiful. And not that I was looking to use it for anything, but I just had this sort of connection moment of, oh, if this, then maybe this is possible. And the other thing that really made me say, okay, I've got to explore this, Don, was the soprano solo at the very end. And unfortunately, for a full confession, I am a trumpet player. And I heard that and I thought, well, wait a second. I know exactly. That was the one thing I knew for certain. I knew exactly who was going to get that solo to a high C on a B flat trumpet. And then it just all made sense from that point forward. And I dug back in my emails in preparing for today, and I looked at my first email where I said, well, I'm a guy who heard a concert and I just love your music, and would you let me arrange it? And you said, well, who the heck are you? And I sent you a couple of things that I had done, and you were very kind for letting me tackle this, because honestly, I was a neophyte in this kind of translation process. But it was such a joy, and you were very gracious, and I'm very grateful for that, Don.
You know, it's interesting, Mark, that this piece was both a kind of a catalyst for me to embrace choral writing in a greater way, and for you also just something to bring you into this new arena of writing and arranging, which you obviously, it's just you're born to do.
Well, I was thinking the same thing. Is this early in your choral output? Is this one of the first?
It's very early, yeah.
Okay. So this is the third thing that I had really gone to work on really hard. And I found it just sorted itself out. The music is so beautiful, and it made sense to me to try and bring it into this other arena.
So Mark, you call this freely transcribed. Was that because it was only the third one you'd done before, or why do you call it freely transcribed? I'm curious to know that, and I would love to know what changes you've made. Now, truthfully, I did my due diligence and I compared it to the original, and I tweaked a couple things, which we had a conversation about. But I'd love to know why you called it freely transcribed, and what changes did you make to the original work?
Well, it's interesting. As many things as Don was saying, you have all the forces and colors of the wind ensemble at your disposal when you bring a work from chorus to winds. What we don't have is that key component of text. And text defines interpretation, it defines meaning. And if we're going to generate meaning in the context of a piece of music, a work without words, there are other things we need to do. So I explored repeating sections, as you noted, Don, giving it to a chorus of brass players, giving it to a woodwind choir in certain sections, playing with tessitura, trying to understand the best expressive means to let the lines follow and flow together so that they honored the choral version. That was the biggest goal for me. When the freely transcribed part, I greatly admire the work of the late Stephen Stuckey with his funeral music for Queen Mary, and I loved the courage it took. I mean, he did so many more things than I ever would deign to do with anybody's music, but the courage it took to actually make something that he loved, beautiful and malleable, and to stretch and elaborate in certain key moments, and still maintain the composite whole. That's what I mean by freely transcribed. I didn't just simply take a look at the thing and say, okay, here I go, Sibelius, put it all together, and there it is. I really wanted to try to capture in our medium what I heard with such clarity from the choral medium.
Can you talk about that last note, that hanging clarinet note?
I just knew that it was a hope for the future, but it was incomplete. Like, we don't know. There was a certain sort of uncertainty principle going forward. And in the original version that I transcribed, I had ringing glasses in between phrases. And for me, okay, partly, full confession, that was maybe partly because earlier that same year I performed Schwantner's In the Mountains Rising Nowhere, and I had all the wine glasses in the universe arrayed at my disposal. But there was something also, if I was going to repeat something multiple times, I wanted to find a constant thing, because there's something constant about the choral version. There are breathing moments, but there is always something connecting through. So I tried to think of what the upper harmonics of the final chords of each section would mean, and I pulled wine glass notes out to try and make that happen. And the clarinet was a human homage to that kind of idea, if you know what I mean. It was the resonant signature of the piece as it faded into the distance, but it was also leaving an open question. That was what I was thinking of when I was doing that. I will fully confess also that that I had the beautiful music of Eric Whitacre that's been translated to wind ensemble in my ear, and above all, full disclosure, I had the Morton Lauridsen O Magnum Mysterium score nearby, and that wonderful transcription done by H. Robert Reynolds, which I admire to death and perform on a regular basis. And I wasn't ever trying to copy that, but it was inspirational to see how he made malleable that work by Lauridsen. And I wanted to explore the same kind of thing. That's why I say freely transcribed. And those were kinds of the inspirations for trying to bring the work to a wind medium.
Well, thank you. Don, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, or what your impressions of the wind band version?
I just think it's so interesting when this type of collaboration takes place, or when somebody, this is a piece that's gone to many hands now. Started off with my fingers on the piano, and then went to my wife's fingers as she put the text together, and then Mark's, and each person is leaving a little bit of themselves behind, which I think is just beautiful. Because I don't feel like I have ownership over a composition in some ways, that once you release it out there, I really do love the idea that conductors can choose their own tempo. That in some ways I feel when I'm putting the dynamics on a score, I have an idea of how it could be, but there are other more learned people than me out there in the world, and passionate people that may feel differently about a dynamic marking, that I like to release that stuff, and I'm excited to see what other people bring to it. And Mark's ideas were, I just thought, brilliant, and this idea of the little hanging notes, I think it's just so beautiful, because this is a moment that is filled with stillness, and that's what he really captured. And I was curious how he's going to pull it off with wind band, to be honest, because it's such a large force, that to put your small loved one to sleep with such a large force seems a challenge. But he did it, man. It's so great.
Well, I have to say I've used the piece a few times, and in different countries, and the reaction is always the same, especially when I make sure to tell them the text, because I think it's so important. The freedom to love. I think the text is wonderful, and so I tell them that, and you can see the whole room sink into the sounds. They just, you can hear their hearts when they play this piece. So I'd like to thank both of you. Don, thank you for writing such an inspirational piece, really just absolutely wonderful. And Mark, thank you so much for giving me access to this piece and the wind band directors of the world access to this piece now, and it's a wonderful contribution, Canadian contribution to the wind band repertoire. So thank you both for sharing your time and your wisdom today, and hopefully more people will be playing this piece in the future. I'll make sure to include some information on where they get it in the final credits.